Good morning, everybody. Confidence. Good morning. Confidence. That's the key word for today, and it's not only today, but it has been for as long as we have Vermilion started. Exactly today, a year ago, I got the news that I needed to stay in the hospital on bed rest for the remainder of my pregnancy of my third baby, which would mean another 7 to 8 weeks if everything went okay. There was too much risk for me and the baby to go home. I can tell you I stepped into a roller coaster of emotions. Worried about health of my of baby and myself, but also logistics. How are we going to manage this with 2 girls at home of 5 and 3 years old, and my husband who's working long hours and traveling? I hadn't felt so insecure about health of my own body and the situation itself for a long time. We moved 3 years ago from the Netherlands, finally settled in as a family. I started to build up a company together with Anju, and then this happened. 1 year later, I'm here, standing with Anju. Come here. Feeling very confident, actually. Anju, my amazing business partner, who stepped in and kept the lights on for our company. And I'm here in front of a group of wonderful and intelligent people, all having their own interests, skills, and stories. As a family, we dealt with the situation amazingly. How? We prepared. We explained the situation to our daughters. We organized childcare. My husband realized that working 100% instead of 180% also works. And he learned to cook, which is great. And neighbors were literally preparing food for the girls and my husband, which was amazing. You finally see what your network does for you. So why am I telling all this? Because you think, okay, I'm here at a career re-entry conference. Why is she telling about her baby in the hospital, right? I can imagine that that's... just want to show you a quick picture of my beautiful kids so you know what it's all about. They're healthy, everything, it went well. They all have their own story, and they're so confident in their own small world. Things in life happen for a reason, and it brings new perspectives, inspiration, and can shift your mindset. So again, why am I telling this? I already mentioned the word confidence a lot. I mentioned the word preparation a lot. I learned that it is okay to be insecure about things in life, like I said, like I was insecure about my health, I was insecure about the situation. You can be insecure about yourself, your skills, your value. You don't need to be confident about everything in your life. It is a matter of overcoming your insecurities. And what do you need to do to make it happen? And the answer is preparation. And that is why we put this date for you together. It's all about preparing you to take that next step in your career. So we have done a lot of work with promotion, so you know probably what's going to happen today, but we also put some booklets together and you will see the agenda. We will have resume carousel, we will have elevator pitch, we will have career discovery, we will have an amazing panel discussion with company to get the company perspective. So it's all for you. And we think this is what you need in order to either find that first step in what you want to do, or maybe you're already ready to get to the next level and you want to get your resume done. I know a lot of faces in this room, which is great to see a lot of familiar faces, but I also see a lot of new faces, and I think that's actually great as well. I shouldn't say more amazing, but I love to have new faces in the room as well. So just a quick introduction of us, Vermilion Talent. What do we do? We lead women to the next chapter of their career, and we do that with confidence, with inspiration, and with happiness. We believe that it is needed to have those 3 ingredients to make it a successful career re-entry. How we do that is really, this is really like the concrete things that we do. If you become a member, if you become part of our community, this is what we can do for you. So just so you know, that is what Vermilion Talent does. And then of course this annual conference that we have today. So yeah, I want to congratulate for being here. I want to congratulate you for being here today. Taking the time for yourself, thinking about your next step and get inspired and take action. And it's in that order, I think. I'm looking forward to all the elements of the agenda today, and I hope you do too. So I want to give the word to Anju.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne-Barbara. So Stephanie, could you do me a favor and go back to the picture with the kids? I just want to start there. So one of our advisors asked us what was the biggest surprise of this whole process that Anne-Barbara and I have been going through over the past couple of years, starting our own company, creating these experiences. And I pointed to that little guy in the middle, Reich. So when Anne-Barbara told me that she was expecting, it was a big surprise, but as she said, we pulled through, and we have, and I claim him, I claim this baby. You see the resemblance, yes? As our Vermilion baby. Thank you all so much for being here today. This is our second annual conference, and we've worked so hard to create a day not only to inspire you, but really a day of action as well. So you will see the elements of that throughout the day. So we encourage you to participate. We encourage you to give us feedback. So I just want to walk you through a few logistics so you know kind of the lay of the land. And before I do that, I want to give a big thank you to our corporate sponsors, New York Life, Regeneron, Celerant, and Wilson Elser for their generosity and support of not only Vermilion, but of each of you, because by becoming sponsors of Vermilion, they are saying that they're interested in you and the value that you bring to the table. So thank you very much. Also want to mention our media partners, Junior League, She Leads, Manhattanville College, and Path Forward. Thank you for helping us get the word out and filling this room today. And of course, one of our interactive sessions that Anne-Barbara mentioned is our resume review section, which we have companies participating such as New York Life, Celerant, Wilson Elser, Morgan Stanley, PepsiCo, Room to Read, Thomson Reuters, Westchester Community College, and Regeneron. So again, this support from our corporate partners and our corporate community means a lot to create a more rich experience for you today. So on your tables, you all have a booklet. That is your guide for today. So in there is the agenda for the day, bios of all of our speakers and resume reviewers, and of course space to take notes, etc. This is your guide. There's extra copies, and just find one of us if you need one. We have a membership table set up in the back. We are notorious for not promoting ourselves. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that we are here. Grab Anne-Barbara or I, one of our volunteers. If you have any questions, happy to speak with you. Housekeeping. So there's bathrooms. Most of you have found the bathrooms at this point. There's water, snacks. We'll have lunch served in the lunchroom as well. Parking. You know, I hope it was okay. I'm a worst case scenario type of person, so I wanted to put it out there, but I hope everybody found parking. If you need to step out to take care of your meters, move spots, etc., feel free. We will, of course, accommodate you. What else? There's so much more. Wanted to mention, so on your tables also you'll see Post-it notes, and the purpose of that is really as you go throughout the day, you know, if you look in my room, my bedroom above my bed, I have Post-it notes all over with different things that I remember and quotes and things that inspire me, and we would love for you to do the same. So as you're going through the day and you have these moments of learning or inspiration, share it with us. We want to know what you got out of today, and you can actually just take it and put it right there on that board, that square back there. Just stick them on there, and I would love to see that board full by the end of the day. So don't be shy. Take care of that, please. And I want to thank, of course, our team. We couldn't have put this day together without our extended team. So when I call you, if you can just wave hello to everybody. Amber Browning Coyle. Where is Amber? Okay, we'll come back to Amber. So Amber is going to be our guest interviewer today. She'll be here along with Ryan. So pop over to Amber. Yes, Ryan is here as well. If you have something that you would like to share about your experience today, about your experience with the reentry, we would love to hear it. Allison is right here. Allison, she is our photographer. She'll be taking headshots for those of you who signed up. If anybody would still like to sign up, we have 5 spots available. So please see Allison directly, and she will take care of it. You all look beautiful, so you should get that, get it done. It's something that people put off, and we have brought her to you, so get it done. We have Alyssa Tomasetti, who's right over here. Alyssa is doing our social media production today, so she's going to be tweeting and capturing, again, learnings. And if anyone, I just want to see a show of hands, who is active on social media for professional reasons? Okay, good. If anyone needs help setting up their profile, you can also see Alyssa. She has volunteered to help you set up a profile if you don't have one. So during a break, during lunch, just grab Alyssa, and she's happy to help you do that. Yeah.
Okay, you're active, so that means also be active today. It's okay to have your phones out and to post about this event, share quotes maybe, or anything.
Yeah, take your phones out. It's not rude. I tell my kids it's rude, but it's okay. Take your phones out, take pictures, tweet, post it on Facebook. We want to get the word out, and we want you to have a great experience. And one other thing, our team of volunteers, we have Stephanie over here who's been wonderful, and Linda and Debbie who are out front at registration. So I think that, oh, and Kathy, of course. Kathy, where's Kathy? Kathy, raise your hand. So Kathy D'Agostino is the director of our coaching network, and please feel free to get in touch if you have any questions. She'll be here throughout the day as well. Sorry. Oh, and Sheila. And Sheila, sorry, I should just use that list. We have Sheila Crowley here, who will be leading our career discovery session. So we're going to walk through each element as we go through the day, but just wanted to let you know who's part of our team, and feel free to grab any one of us if you have any questions. So welcome. We're so excited to have this experience with you. And without further ado, I think we are going to get to Rupa. So we're so excited to have Rupa here today. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Rupa Unnikrishnan. It's very difficult to give Rupa a brief introduction. If you look at her bio, you will know what I mean. She has accomplished so much. She is, if I have to sum it up in one word, she is an innovator in every part of her life, and I think we'll get a sense of that today. She's currently head of strategy and innovation at Harman International, and has held similar roles at many Fortune 500 companies. So Rupa has written this amazing book called Career Catapult, which she's going to be talking about today. And I just want to mention, so I had a chance to read her book, and she talks about this notion of jolts in your life. And a jolt is, I liken it to a wake-up call. And this is what companies do all the time. They are forced to innovate to survive. And this is what Rupa will be talking about, is taking the principles that companies use for innovation and applying it to us as individuals. Not just to survive, but also to thrive. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Rupa.
Thank you. Hello. What a great room. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And such a positive female energy. You notice how they thanked everyone. They had a list of people to thank. Nicely done. So good morning, everyone. A little bit. All right. Good morning. Okay, better? Whoops. Shouldn't laugh. I'll give you a little bit of a sense of my career, and I am hoping that that'll give you some sense of relief in where you are, a sense of hope in where you're going, and also a sense of what it takes. I think the struggle is real. It's an ongoing journey, and I look forward to making this a little interactive as well. So expect a little Q&A and testing, not quite testing, but Q&A. I'm Rupa, as Anju mentioned. Firstly, thank you, Anju and Ann Barbara. What a great event, and I think the concept itself is fabulous. So I wrote this book last year, but it was a sort of a work in progress, I feel, over a significant period of time. So I started, I studied in England, was recruited here, and really wanted to go back to India, where I found that every time I would interview in companies in India, they'd say things like, oh, you got a couple of years, and then you'd go off and have a family. And I thought, wow, if you think of my career as 3 years, I'm in trouble, because I don't. But, you know, even that is inherent bias, and I think though we face inherent bias of different types in many cultures. Europe's no different, the US is no different. Maybe they give us different time frames, but there are some inherent biases. I am currently the head of strategy at Harman. And to Anju's point, what got me here was a series of jolts. There were times, this one was a very positive jolt. There were times when they were not so positive jolts in my life. And the reason I wrote the book was, along the way, I had decided at one point, I'd had a big birthday and decided I wanted to work for myself. And I had 5 years in which I was consulting. And during that time, I ended up doing a master coach sort of certification. Partly because people would come to me, I would start doing strategy work and quickly would go into this conversation about how do I make this work per se, right? How do I implement this strategy and how do I make it work for me? And so this sort of element of people being challenged in being everything they could be came into place quite often. And so I started just scribbling because every so often it would happen and I would notice the same pattern. People trying to be innovative, having innovative ideas, challenging themselves to be more innovative because they'd been successful, but had they actually done everything they could to go far? So that was part of the reason that I wrote this book. So capturing all those ideas, and the book came out. Two other thoughts. In my time, I've been in some very transformative businesses. So healthcare, I was at Pfizer, where I was the head of strategy and innovation at the corporate level. I was at BlackRock, which was in financial services, Citibank. And through it all, I think there's a learning that happens, but there's also a recognition that you get a sense of there being so much industry knowledge, you can't make transitions. And yet, I could, partly because of the training I got as a consultant early in my life. And so I would sort of ask you, as you're thinking through your career reentry, keeping some of those principles in mind, which I'll talk to you about later, which is, there is no next step that is actually impossible. It's about sort of working towards making that change happen. So change happens. What you see on the left there is the Mercedes-Benz museum. So what do you think is the first thing you see in the museum? Any guesses? A car, right? That's what you'd think, sort of a snazzy car. Now you go up, you enter, and you go up to the top of the building, and it's like a spiral. And the first thing you see is this horse. And what you're seeing there, right next to the horse, are my little twins. They were 6 at that time. They're 14 now. But what you have below is sort of is right exactly what's written under the horse, because it's a stuffed horse, which apparently I suspect it doesn't belong to the emperor. But the quote under there is Emperor Wilhelm's quote, where he said, "I do believe in the horse. The automobile is no more than a transitory phenomenon." This is a guy who runs this country, surrounded by these institutions that he's built. He was one of the early investors in engineering education in Germany. He's seeing all of this happen, and yet can't get out of his head this idea that the horse is here to stay, the automotive is not. Why? Because they've built their lives around these cobbled streets, right? They've built their homes around a space where the carriage can come in and you can get out they've set up the lantern so that it can be the right height as you ride by in your horse and light the lanterns. Everything is built around the horse. And nothing can change as long as you're embedded in that thinking. Fast forward less than 140 years later, and I think the horse is his time has come to pass, right? Hold on. So I think there's a couple of thoughts for us to consider here. In this room, there's significant amount of talent. I mean, I suspect that if we asked, we'd probably cover PR, marketing, analytics. I mean, I feel like we probably have every possible, some version, some flavoring of every possible career option right in here. Let's look at the numbers. So 50% of, more than 50%, 51% I think, of the US economy, of the potential working class is female. And what do you think the leadership representation is? Don't forget the C level, but 16% actually. So I wish it was better. It's not as bad as that, but it's 16%. So the drop off is significant, and I'm talking about C-2. By the time you get to C level, don't even talk about it, right? But the toughest section is the sticky middle, right, where you see the greatest push and pull into and outside of the workforce. So what's happening in there? There's a series of built-in assumptions in us sometimes, but in the organizations, that prevent us from actually being able to accelerate growth. So as you're thinking about making that next transition, one of the things to consider is test this organization that you're considering. Test to see what you're getting into. If you're able to find in there a smattering of mentoring programs, a sense of support systems, a sense of their ability to flex around your own growth aspirations, and recognizing that they think as capabilities, that's a better way to sort of engage with them, because that's something to consider, is how the inherent biases within the organization. So when it comes to our own careers, part of the way I thought about the book was really looking at dominant logic, but asking each person who's looking to make that transition to think about your own dominant logic, right? So when I work with companies and thinking about their strategies and how to get to innovation, I say, think about what is your dominant logic, your inherent biases about who you think you are. Because what got you here is not going to get you there, right? So we have to recognize who you think you are so that we can break the mold where possible. Same thing for us, right? As people with careers, we have inherently in our minds insights around what we bring to the table. Let's make sure we really look at those assumptions and test them. What do you think your function is? If you call yourself an accountant versus somebody who understands the financial mechanisms of, let's pick an industry, solar energy, how to sort of create a solar energy sort of engagement space, right? There's a trading arena around in energy as a whole. It's a trading game, really. Don't think if you worked in energy, you're not just an accountant. You're somebody who gets how to trade energy. You also somebody who gets how to trade. You're also possibly somebody who can inherently understand blockchain because it's a trading platform. So you've gone from being an accountant to being potentially somebody who could easily become an expert in blockchain, right? So I'm not saying spin it. I'm saying actually engage around that inherent assumption about what you're bringing to the table and who you are. So that's function. There's a question of time. I look at you. I'm going to tell you when to move. And I do know I have half an hour, and I'll speed it up. But time. When is it that you provide this function? There are folks who think about work as these 9 to 5. There was a point in my life. Part of the reason I decided to take 5 years and consult was the kids were in their early teens. And 9 years old, actually. So I decided this is a time. I'd sort of reflected, and many of us take time off early in childhood. And I had I have twins, I had some support, and I'd said, okay, I think that the value I bring as a mom, yes, I'm a nurturer, but more importantly, I'm challenging. Let's actually use my challenging energy. And so from 9 to 14, I took the time because I wanted to use my time when I provide my intellect to my client. I wanted to do it differently because I was able to, in those 5 years, every summer, month and a half, India, Italy, we would just go off and do things. And I didn't want to have to put in a note to somebody to ask for that month and a half. So time, think about when you want to use your time, how you want to use it, where. Like a lot of what I did, I was able to do it either traveling to a place when I could get somebody to take care of the kids or be around, or online, with all of the technologies out there. hence which gets to method. You get this sense of consulting where you have to be in the room with the senior person, no longer relevant, right? So similarly, use the exact same lenses potentially and think about how you see yourself, the value you bring to the table, and how you can define your next role, redefine it. How do you define it today? And think orthogonally differently and say, how else could this be? How else could I bring value to the table, right? Does that make sense? I'm seeing some nodding heads, right? All right. So that was sort of a first element of it. I'll tell you quickly a little story about this beautiful, fabulous young lady who used to be my intern. So she's an analyst, and she went to being a world leader in less than 8 years. Here's how. So she joined the consulting firm I was in when she was, I want to say, 21. She had finished her bachelor's degree, had a BA in development studies or in Africa, working in Africa, had spent a lot of her youth sort of doing projects in Africa, decided she wasn't quite sure how, she knew she didn't want to go into some of the big UN type of organizations, didn't see the potential there, but she was stuck, came into consulting. I had a project that I'd sold in India, and she has her dad is of Indian origin, and I couldn't get any analyst to go with me to spend 4 months in India. And she said, all right, I'll come. 2 of us plane, get to India. Our client was an outsourcing company. And she sort of engages with all of the clients. She's learning. And I told her early on, she talked about how she didn't feel confident that she should be on this project. She didn't have any sort of experience. And I said, that's the whole point of consulting, is you go in and you very quickly, you have to be an expert. Read, study. It's not easy, but you can get to expertise. So within the first month, I see her sort of really soaking everything in, and then she starts having these challenges. We would sort of have breakfast every morning, and she would throw these ideas at me about things to do. And one of her ideas was, if you can do consulting in outsourcing in India, which is based on analytics, I have met enough people in Kenya and Nigeria to know that that talent pool exists. Why don't we do it there? And I said, why don't you? and I literally was being flippant. She went off, goes on the summer vacation to Africa, meets with a series of internet cafe owners, and convinces them, you have all this downtime during this sort of 4 to 8 p.m. period. If you could get a small group of young people together to work on projects, I'll source you projects. I said, sure, go, knock yourself out. It doesn't matter. And she starts the work while she's in consulting, goes off, decides to leave after the first 2 years, as many people do, and starts this company called Sama. And now she has 8 divisions, including a beauty division, a health division, the original Sama Source, which is the outsourcing division, and she hangs out with people like Mohammed Yunus, and the CEO of Virgin, who's one of her investors, right, Branson. So this is the kind of story, if you are really letting yourself be open and thinking, what did she come with? She came with curiosity, of course, and an inherent understanding of the market she was going to develop. And she built a new expertise around outsourcing, and then she just designed this new space, right? I'm not saying that all of us have to go off and be entrepreneurs, but I think this mindset of sort of redesigning who you are, because she had started by being a nonprofit, somebody who worked in a nonprofit as a development worker, and now she is a CEO who gets her photos taken all the time, and that is something to be lauded. All right, so going on. Let's talk about the first step. So early in my time during my consulting period, one of the things I do is I invest in companies, in sort of tech startups, and so there's a group called TIE. And I landed up meeting a lot of innovators, startup folks, as well as people who are making investments. And I did a survey of about 500 of them. And what I saw and I'd done a series of interviews during my consulting time with innovative people. And so I took all of that data and sort of did a crunching of analysis. And I said, what is it clearly that sort of differentiates the innovators and the people who sort of are also Ryans, right? I mean, I'm not saying that everyone has to be off creating new solutions, but what is the mindset that is different between an innovator and the rest of us? And one of the things was more than, I'd say 71% of innovators talk about every month taking time to actually think about who they are, digging deep, reassessing to say, have I grown over time? One is understanding what is it that motivates them, because that shifts and changes. I've experienced it, you've experienced this, right? There were times when you were ready to zip up and go to work, then there was family and other needs, and now you're back again. So what is this motivating passion? The second is, what is it you bring to the table? Like I said, are you an accountant, or are you good at trading, setting up trading systems? And finally, what are the issues that hold you back? What are the black holes? And I would find them talking, in my interviews, I'd find them talking about, you know what, I know there's something I'm missing because I'd be presenting and it felt like there's a certain type of person who doesn't hear me. I don't know what's wrong with them. And I'd say, okay, there's probably something going on with them. But is there something that we could be doing differently? You could be doing differently. And so sometimes you're just never sure. And in the specific case I'm talking about, part of it was the tone was always of, let me tell you. And not everyone wants to be told, right? And I said, could you actually engage with those people to understand what would work with them? Because some of these stakeholders are going to have to make decisions to invest in you or not. Because 80% of the investment decision is about whether they like the founder or not. They like the technology, but they need to like the founder. So we would talk about those issues. And similarly, I think when you're thinking about your career reentry, really step back and think about your motivating passions, like what makes you want to get out of bed, right? When you take up I write about some tricks of finding out your motivating passions, because sometimes you've been so immersed in one part of your life, moving back into the career space feels a little daunting. Pick up the newspaper, sort of start recognizing what is it you read about each time. If you're constantly going, and one of the folks I worked with was an accountant at Morgan Stanley, and she made the transition into solar energy, partly because every time she would sort of take up the newspaper, she would of course skim everything, but then when it came to new energy sources, she would spend the hour or a half an hour on the commute reading that. And I said, feels like something there. and so she was able to engage around that. So test yourself. There might be things that you do, right? You're watching certain types of shows that maybe you can recognize. The thing about digging deep is it doesn't have to be a big structured process. You can be folding up the laundry, but just remind yourself once a week, once a month, think about these three spaces. What's going on in your life, what's shifting, and actually spend time scribing it somewhere, putting it in your phone, on your diary. Just be intentional though. And when you're going in to make this next transition, one of the things you can find in the book is the last page has a code, and you can actually download some worksheets. And you can engage with people who worked with you in the past, perhaps. Or even in the present, if you work with your, I don't know if it's in your school with the parent-teacher association, people you work with, send them the little sheet and say, do you have time to talk to me about what do you think I really excel at? What could I do differently? Where can I grow? What are the skills what would it take for you to recommend me to somebody to work with them? And it's sort of by sending them something like this or structuring this conversation, firstly, you're saying, I value your input, right? I think many of us think, can't take anyone's time. No, people actually are quite flattered that you've asked. And it also allows you to advertise subtly the fact that you're getting ready for the next step. So you don't have to put a stamp down saying, I am looking for a job, you gotta help me. It can be in the guise of this conversation, which is also going to be valuable to you in getting to that next stage in your thinking. So I also talk about how do you stay relevant, because that's the other concern that sometimes keeps people back, right? Stock trends and innovations, and I don't mean the bad killer stock thing, but I mean stock like a panther. If take time to really watch what people are talking about. you can actually get word clouds from various companies. If you go in and say economist, go to a word cloud generator, put in the Economist and URL in there, or a series of articles, it'll pop out a word cloud at you, and you can sort of look at that and think, I wonder what sharing in my industry looks like these days, right? Really thinking through what are some of these trends that are popping up at you, and how are you going to sort of translate that into the work you do. And so, like social media, what does social media in banking these days look like, if some of you are going back into banking? Being relevant, being able to have that conversation makes you an interesting candidate, right? So be disciplined and purposeful about sort of the managing and stalking trends as well. The third element that I sort of tend to focus on is jolting your network. I was asked at one point to invest in a healthcare startup, and I looked at their list, and there was like, I think it was a team of 5. How many women do you think there were in there? There were 12 advisors. Number of women? Zero. So I said, this is a great idea. Let's look at some of your outputs. And they were analyzing sort of key trends around sort of healthcare spend. And I said, great. I see that you, and then they would sort of recommend things to do. Go to the gym, go for a run, get out more. I was like, have you considered outcomes that look like, take up yoga, perhaps consider different forms of different sort of career paths. Why are your analytic outcomes all pretty like within a box? Have you considered getting out of the box? So I looked at the analytic, and then I said, by the way, who do you think buys these analytic programs in companies? Because they were planning to sell this program into companies. HR. What percentage of HR do you think is male? It's not 0, more like 55%, right? So I said, by the way, you're talking to me, so do me a favor, come back with a slightly different type of list. And by the way, here's a list of very competent women in Boston who work in healthcare. So challenge, give them the business rationale, test the product, give them these names, right? They came back with 2 women on the advisory board, and they added a product manager who was female. And I said, now I'm writing the check. So put your money where your mouth is. But now, jolting your network that way is one way to do it. But also sort of engaging with your network so that you understand, hey, what is it you're doing? And how can startups are constantly looking for strong product managers, people who understand a product, can redesign it, ensure that they're right for the new, for whoever they're trying to sell the product into. Firstly, that's a great group for you to be looking at. But secondly, by putting yourself out there with different types of networks that you probably have access to, just spend your time on LinkedIn understanding what your network looks like. You're actually a hugely valuable resource. People are trying to amp up their female sort of quotient, right? Time, 5 minutes. So they're trying very hard to increase their sort of capabilities, their talent diversity. Put yourself out there through your network, jolt your network a little, tell them a little bit about it. So don't just be a passive user of your network. Drive your network to actually understand it, but engage them positively. They need to understand what you bring to the table. So there are people I know on LinkedIn who will sort of, do a thumbs up on anything I post. And then there are people who will say, oh, that's insightful. Here's what that would mean if it was still in healthcare. I'd be like, oh, you're not in healthcare anymore, but do you want to be in healthcare? 5 names I can give you, right? If the third time somebody sort of comments or engages in a sort of constructive way, I remember this person. And that's what I would sort of encourage you to do. It's like not just, some of us sort of at the initial point of reentry are being sort of more of a watcher, right? Be an active participant in a way that's value added to the other person. And it doesn't always have to be, connect with me, and by the way, tomorrow I need a job. Never a constructive way to do it, right? So connect with me, spend a couple of weeks getting to know what I do, engage with me on the issues, and then say, is there somebody I can talk to? Much better interaction model, right? 2 more and we're done. So prototyping. So one way to, the benefit of is what's called the nomad economy, is that there's there's an interest, sort of a widening interest in having new ways of engaging with talent, right? So as you're doing is sort of laying out your career entry plan, think about ways to bottle serendipity. So think of every event, think of every engagement as a point where serendipity happens. My first time in New York, I didn't know what to do. First couple of months, I would actually literally follow the lights. I'd take a subway into Soho, get out and walk and see, okay, the red light, let's turn, keep walking. I would literally walk until I found something interesting, right? And I call that bottling serendipity, but you can actually bottle serendipity with your careers. You're talking to your neighbor, turns out that he or she is the head of innovation at something, no relevance to what you do, but think about having a follow-up conversation or understand what his wife does. You take the conversation where it can and look at every interaction as a point of serendipity. Because I know that's almost magical thinking, but that's a way of thinking about life where you can pull the most out of it. But then design around it. So design thinking, I do a sort of a mini design thinking piece in the book, but how do you sort of build around the end user and build your capabilities around it, or tell your story around it? And how do you rapidly prototype? If you take on projects, for example, and you say, I want to now be in the blockchain space. I know there's a startup that has no money, but is looking for somebody who can manage a product. I'm going to go do a month or two helping them lay out their plan. And in doing that, you're sort of designing a new way of thinking about yourself and creating a new storyline for yourself. So you're prototyping something for your career, which you can then go off and sort of productize, right? Almost like a product. People tend to sort of think of prototyping as something you do with your 3D printer. Think of yourself as the 3D printer and design your next experience. And finally, go extreme, right? These are things you've always heard about. You're not an imposter. We as women tend to have this sort of imposter sort of fear inside of us. No, because you're redesigning your life, you kind of go in thinking, oh God, I've had like the last 10 years away, I can't sort of project myself as capable. Not true. There are people who are currently in jobs where they've just been promoted up and they're sort of swinging for the fences anyway. So what's the harm in sort of retelling your story internally? Self-talk matters. Be kind to yourself. There's a book by Marshall Goldsmith who talks about how there are people behind this. If you think of yourself karmically, there are sort of 100 people behind you telling you where you're going wrong. If you turn around and look at them, they all have your face. it's you. so self-talk matters, right? But don't go in there willy-nilly. De-risk it. Understand what it is you want to create for yourself and do the math. One of the early things I told most of my coachees was, go get yourself a financial advisor. Look at what it is you're going to need and work towards that. Either sort of ensure that you don't go off and make some big, bold move without having laid some kind of groundwork, or make the big, bold move knowing what it's going to take to bring the rest of your family group along, right? But go in knowing, de-risk your next big shift. And then storytell. Storytell about yourself in the context of this new big leap you're going to take, right? So there's a set of capabilities, there's a discipline. It feels onerous, but if you start doing it sort of methodically, it's going to feel very natural to you. You start telling the story, you're staying connected with the trend, you're engaging with your network differently, and soon you feel different about what you're trying to get done, right? And that's really about the sort of catapult you have to create for yourself. So I think I'm within time. Do we want a couple of minutes of Q&A, or yeah?
Yeah, I wanted to suggest that yet because it's there's a lot of valuable information that you shared. So are there any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a question. So can we maybe bring the? It's all the way in the back, I think we had.
Career path for relaunching is starting.
Can you bring?
Are you still out there funding startups?
Yes, I am.
Any advice for like women-owned businesses on how to go out and start pitching to get capital? Any advice on how to go out, start pitching, and getting capital?
One thing I've seen from women who are successful in generating funding is that you have to be very true to what you are. So they say don't pitch like a man. But pitch like a man, in the sense that you need to go in with confidence, you need to have all of your numbers, you need to be really clear about the impact, because sometimes we go in with social impact stories. Very rarely do even the social impact investor doesn't want to only hear social impact. They want to hear the revenue story as well, whether it's revenue to you or revenue to the system. Because if you're going to change a system, they're also thinking, if I invest in this thing, where else can I invest so that I can get the benefits out of that, right? So I think it's really about telling your story in a way that is very revenue and outcome oriented, and not being tentative. Does that help?
Right. So also how do you choose, say you need very, very angel? Do you try to go very, very industry specific to what your product is?
No, that
you're Harman International.
Right.
So how industry specific do I need to be to pitch?
Well, so I'm Harman International, but as an angel, I work with an angel network. It's called the Thai Angel Network, but there's also 37 angels, which is mostly women. And then there are a lot of sort of networks that are angel networks that are investing in women. So I would have, you're in a very angel rich environment here. I would find that, by the way, New York and the East Coast is much better than West Coast in funding women, right? So I would start by sort of laying out the angel network around you, and reach out to me with your business case, by the way. All right.
Thank you.
All right. And if you go to the last page, I want as many of you as possible do follow me on Twitter, not just because I want more people following me on Twitter, but I tend to write about or tweet interesting things about things like this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We had another question, I think, in the back. There, yeah.
Hi, Rupa.
Hi.
I want to thank you for this talk. I really appreciate what you said about our own self-talk. I read a statistic that alarmed me, and it was that when a man is looking to apply for a position, he'll look at the criteria, and if he meets about 30% of it, he's going to go for it.
Yep.
Whereas a woman will look at the same criteria, and unless she has 90% or higher,
Yeah.
that she won't even apply.
Yeah.
So I wonder, what are some ways that we could close that gap? That I think of it as a confidence gap, and so how do we, make inroads and just go for it?
Well, it's a confidence gap and it's a standards gap, right? We do it both ways. When we look at women that we are trying to decide should we forward their name along, we're doing exactly the same thing, which is not helpful. Some of this is about imagination, and so this first part, where I say really understand your motivating passions and your capabilities, is a good sort of grounding of that exact same thing. Is that you really look at yourself and say, what are you really capable of? So that next time you're doing this, firstly go from 90% to say 60%, but then sort of actually be able to sort of say, hey, of that 60% of those criteria, even though I was not an accountant, I did pretty much 80% of what the accountant did at my school, as my school body. I think being able to sort of really make that shift to understand what capabilities you have is, I think, the next piece to this. Yeah. Does that help?
That's a good question. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of the women in our community are struggling with that, right? Yeah, I don't know, and I shouldn't. Or that's again the confidence that we're talking about. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Rupa.
you. It was a pleasure.
I think everybody is ready to take some action now. We have listened for a bit, and I think it's time to do the breakouts. To go to the breakouts.